Hi, welcome everyone to Empower Her. I have a very special guest today with me, Sarah. Hi, Sarah, how are you?
I'm good. It's great to meet you.
So, I invited Sarah because I had looked into her profile and I was really impressed by her credentials, by her experience, and I just really wanted to have like a deep dive into your career and you as a woman and your journey. So, if you can start with just a quick introduction about yourself.
Absolutely. So, my name is Sarah, and I am mom to two very tiny humans. I have a 15-month-old and a recently turned 3-year-old. So, very busy. And on the work side, I have been in tech really my entire career. So, well over a decade, inching a little closer to 15 years now. I've been in the Canadian tech ecosystem, working with some really early stage Canadian tech companies and helping them scale and grow. So I've dedicated my career really to the field of customer success. I'm currently working as VP of Customer Success at Leap Tools. And I also, throughout my entire career, building early customer success teams, have learned a ton. So I recently launched a course called CX Found to really teach others how to build customer success
Mhm.
at those early stage tech and SaaS companies as well.
Amazing. And where can that course be found?
Yeah, so that can be found at cxfound.com.
Okay, awesome. So I will put that link in the description just so that if anybody is interested, they can definitely access that. So let's start with a little bit about, how your journey started, whether it's, your career or as a woman. So my question usually with the guest is initially, how has your family or your culture influenced you as a woman? So, living in Canada or any other country, it definitely influences you. There's so many different cultures with different countries. So I'm just curious on how, you were brought up.
I mean, there's so many ways that your culture and where you grow up influence who you are. And I mean, there's countless examples. So I'll give you just one is really when I was growing up, there was this constant narrative that I think most girls hear that is like math is not really accessible. Like math is typically something that they're like, "Oh, you're such a sweet little girl. You're so great at drama. You're so great at English." And I was. I credit my experience in drama to me being comfortable in a boardroom and with senior executives and speaking at conferences. So I am in no way diminishing the value of drama. I actually think we need way more value placed on the arts. But really, as a girl, you're often taught, like, hey, math, is that a little tricky for you? Why don't you focus on something else instead? And so for years, I was working in tech and I thought, like, hey, I'm working with customers. I love it. I'm working with people. That's where my skill set lies. But there's really going to be a blocker. Like, you can only get so high if you're not comfortable with the data and the numbers. And that felt like it was just like an inevitability for me. And
Mhm.
so I am a very type A, very focused person. I tried really hard to overcome some of those obstacles. And I think I heard it was going to be hard. So I tried to dive in headfirst to things that were really hard. Like I took courses on data analytics and I tried to
Mhm.
start with like pivot tables. And I was like, oh, they're right. This is too hard for me. I can't do it. And what I needed to do was actually find ways to make it accessible and make it easier for me and start small in the exact same way that if I'm coaching a customer success manager, I'm not going to say, hey, I need you to run an expert call, become an expert at call management. I'm going to chunk it out and give them a really small, accessible piece and say, hey, I need you to get really strong on running calls with a clear agenda. So let's just start by always having a clear agenda at the beginning and wrap up at the end. And then we'll layer on the next skill. I
Mhm.
had to give myself the same grace and do the same thing and say, hey, let's just start by tracking open rates with an email campaign. Let's start by running a save play and tracking conversion on renewals. Like one piece of data, that is data. And so one small way that it has impacted who I am and how I grow is that I had this really false narrative, I think, embedded into me from a very young age. And it was something that I had to overcome. And I had to overcome it in a way that was much more accessible to me. I will say there's tons of things about who I am and how I've grown that are wonderful. So, living in Canada, like I was able to take 13 months of maternity leave with my youngest. Obviously, I'm eternally grateful
Mhm.
to live in Canada and have those kind of opportunities and to have that extra time with my little ones. But there's lots of ways that the culture will shape you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And there's a huge lesson here for everyone, as you talked about, of taking small steps. So if something seems, a huge task or something seems like a huge deal to you, it's always better to go into it with like, small baby steps instead of like diving headfirst sometimes because, that can be overwhelming. So there's a huge lesson to be learned here if anyone is listening. um, and so let's talk a little bit about, when you were a child and you were growing up, education. Um, did you have any specific like dreams when you were growing up? Because when you're like almost getting out of school, going into university, that's when there's a transition time where you're thinking about what my career is going to look like. So what did that look for you?
It's so funny because I think a lot of things have been really core to my personality,
Mhm.
and the way I envisioned them actually like synthesizing and turning into a career are totally different from what's happened. But those core pieces of who I am have always been my drivers. So I've always loved people. I have always been very people centric.
Mhm.
And I've always loved to take care of people. So when I was younger, a lot of that came through in baking. I was always the first person to be like, hey, let's organize a charity bake sale. Let's bake for my friends. My friends used to come over to my house every weekend and they would show up and I would be like, hey, I made, two pies and a couple dozen bars. They were like, oh, okay, that's a lot. There are three of us. But it's just always been really core to who I am. And food is a huge part of how I take care of people.
Mhm.
But it's really always been the people that are at the center of it. And
Mhm.
so when I went to university, I actually started in I finished my undergrad in hospitality and tourism. And I thought that I was going to open a restaurant, open a bakery, and take care of people and feed them.
Mhm.
And the food was kind of a means to how I was going to take care of and nurture all of these people. And obviously, that's not where I ended up. Right out of undergrad, I went into grad school. I did a master's in professional communication because I wanted to kind of diversify myself. And again, that communication was so core to who I was. I wanted to make sure I was communicating effectively with people. Um, and right out of that, I magically stumbled on the world of tech and realized that there was this whole other way of taking care of people. And it
Mhm.
was so cool. Like, there are whole careers where you're taking care of customers. And as I've grown in my career, I'm now taking care of a team of people and they're taking care of customers. So, like, it gets to amplify to be much bigger than a pie.
Mhm.
But it's all centered around that same thing, which is I've always just been kind of a nurturer who loves taking care of people. And whether that is coaching and career development plans, whether that's working directly with customers, understanding their goals, their career ambitions, and helping them achieve them, or whether that is, baking a chocolate peanut butter pie,
Mhm.
it's all centered around the same goal, which is helping people.
Right. So when did you realize that, that was, your core, that, you liked helping out people? Was it like from the beginning or did you realize that later?
I mean, as a kid, I certainly just thought, hey, I like to bake. And I wasn't introspective or thoughtful enough to have thought, hey, it's because it makes people so happy. There's this whole community aspect. It was just, hey, like, if I have
Mhm.
a high school break, let's go home and make cookies and bring them back to my friends.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't think I had put two and two together, that it was really about like the joy that it brought to people when I was doing that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so as I grew older, I think that became more obvious and more evident to me that it really was about like nurturing and fueling people. But when did I have that realization? Probably, honestly, probably at like 25. I was much older by the time I put all of those dots together. I really just feel like I've gotten lucky and kind of tried to stay core to who I am and found things that I thought, like, this is really great. I like this. So let's do more of it. And by following my intuition, I've gotten very, very lucky.
Mhm. Yeah, because a lot of times what happens is when you're like, starting off a career path, especially when you go into university, and then usually what I've seen with people is like they change careers, or somehow they end up doing what they were not doing before. And it's just a weird phase, an awkward phase, where you have to like kind of be introspective and see, okay, what do I really want? So that's why I was like, okay, how did you go from thinking about, oh, like, I might be a baker, or I might be into a restaurant industry, to going into tech, and realizing that, oh, I can use my skills to help out people here too. So that was kind of like my idea.
Yeah, I mean, I got phenomenally lucky. I finished grad school, and like every young person who's finishing grad school, I just needed a job. So I needed to find a job. I was, I don't know, 20, 21, young at the time. And I was interviewing at a few places. I was interviewing with a major hotel chain in North America that had this phenomenal program that would help grow you to a general manager, which was really exciting to me. And I was interviewing for anything that was like communications or people focused because I had just gotten a master's degree in that. And so I finished interviewing with this hotel chain and I thought, like, oh my gosh, those uniforms are terrible. I do not want to wear one of those all day. I mean, the locations are stunning, but it's kind of isolated. And the loneliness was really something that I thought about. Like, hey, I could go live in, Lake Louise in Canada, like stunning, gorgeous, one of the most picturesque locations in the world. But I was like, I think I'm going to be really lonely if I go there. And that was really dissuading for me. Or I could go to this cool tech company that has like Nerf guns and beanbag chairs, and everyone just seems to get along and it's so collaborative. And it's a small team, and I know I can make an impact. And I was just like, well, like the community and the people aspect. And then I get to actually talk to people all day. It's like, yes, that seems like the opposite. It is people, it is communication, it is community. Like that is really motivating for me. And so I just stumbled upon it and I was like, yes, let's double down, let's do it. Um, and I just kept, anytime I found something that was really like speaking to my heart, for lack of a less cheesy term, I just doubled down. So I was like, hey, I'm working with customers. I really like that. How can I do more? Okay, how can I do more? Like, I'm doing this. Let's volunteer for this. So anytime I found something at work that was really like motivating, that I really loved, I would double down and just try and do more and more and more of that. And that's really how I've built my entire career, is not thinking of things that like are nice in concept, but thinking of like, what do I actually do in a day to day that I love, and how do I do more of that? So instead of saying like, hey, hypothetically, what would I design in a career if I could do anything? And then you might find yourself saying things like, oh, like maybe you would want to, I don't know, like maybe I really want total flexibility. I want to set all of my own hours. And that might be what you say. But then on the flip side, it's like, hey, what did I find most motivating? Maybe it was collaboration. Maybe it was these set meetings and syncs I had with people. And this thing that I thought in theory I would like actually doesn't work in practice. So what I've tried to do is not focus on the theory, but focus on the actual execution and say, in a given day, what did I love and how do I get more of that in my career?
Yeah, yeah, and that's again amazing advice if someone is looking to like figure out what their next career move is, to, as you said, not go into theory and actually take a look at what your day to day is. And, if you love that and if you want to do more of it, then, that's a great way to start.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about customer success. So I am also into customer success, so that's definitely a field that I can talk about all day. But I had a couple of questions for you when it comes to customer success. So, what's the one thing that you would say there's like one misconception about this field that you might like to clear up to people?
So I would say, I mean, the most common misconception is that customer success is customer support, and they're very different fields. So in my role, I'm leading customer success, customer support, and customer onboarding. But all of these teams have a really unique function, and the goal of customer success is all about value. So the most common misconception is someone will be coming into an interview. It'll be one of their first customer success interviews, first customer success job, and we'll ask them, hey, why do you want to be in customer success? And they'll find themselves saying something like, hey, I just really want to make people happy. And here's the thing. I love making people happy as much as the next person. Like it's pretty core to who I am is working with people and supporting them. But if you're focused on the happiness, it actually doesn't matter at the end of the day in customer success because all that matters is value. I, for example, am a really happy person. I could be bubbly and friendly and delightful in a call with my customer success manager. And that doesn't actually mean I'm going to renew the service. We can be like having the best time, talking about our favorite ice cream shops, coffee shops, whatever. That doesn't mean I'm going to keep doing business with them. Customer success is all about value. You can be working with the grumpiest customer. They don't want to, just like casually banter back and forth. They just want to get stuff done and get off the call because they're busy. If you are driving huge value for them, they're going to continue to renew. So
Yeah.
that biggest misconception is people come in and they think it's all about making people happy. Making people happy is like nice in concept, but doesn't actually matter in execution. The top priority is like, how do we drive value? How do we make sure you understand the value? We've articulated it. And how do we make sure we're increasing that value? Definitely for our customers and hopefully for our business as well. And if you can really stay centered on value, that's how you win in customer success.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit about your journey. So, you know, can you share how you ended up in the current role that you are right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started at Wave Accounting, which is an amazing tech company. I was a really early employee, 23 or 24. And throughout my journey there, I was really focused on customers. So everything I was doing was scale based. I was working with hundreds of thousands, closer to a million customers towards the end, and really trying to drive adoption. But it was all, email marketing, blogs, contesting, in app messaging, all of that fun stuff. So I had really great data and insights that I was getting from our customers. And I, again, had to teach myself and coach myself to make that data approachable. But everything I was doing was scale based, but I was learning a ton. And so again, I asked myself, like, hey, what do I love in my job? And what I loved was getting that data and getting those insights. And what I loved was hearing about the real impact that our software was making for customers. So that was really important to me. Like, those are the pieces I want to keep. And then I asked myself, like, hey, what do I not love? And so again, I told you, like, I'm really social. I love working with people. And I was working at such a scale that there were so few conversations that I was having. So I was like, okay, that's the piece I want to get rid of. I need to layer in more actual conversations. And that brought me to my next role, where I joined a company called Lupio, another phenomenal Canadian tech company. I joined as employee 10 and really got the opportunity to build up those customer success functions from the ground up. So got to work really closely with a team, which was very motivating to me. We had great insights and data. So again, that was the piece I wanted to bring over. But it was all one-to-one conversations, and that was the piece I wanted to layer in. So I got very fortunate. I found an incredible founding team, incredible peers, many of whom are still my absolute best friends to this day. And we all worked really collaboratively and we're just focused on how do we work as a team to make this company successful. and to make all of our customers successful. We all had so much belief that the software was like making a real difference for these customers. And
Yeah.
so we all worked together, and over the years, it worked. So our customers were seeing a ton of value. We were super collaborative, all working together on the same team. And
Mm.
I managed to grow within that company from a CSM job to the director of customer success. I then had my daughter, had maternity leave with her, and then I joined a company called Leap Tools. And again, I had the opportunity to lead this really large team, global team. So suddenly I was making a difference for even more people's lives, working really collaboratively with them, get into a whole new industry where I thought that they weren't being served with the tech that they deserved. So suddenly, again, we were making a real impact for our customers. We're really supporting them and taking customers who haven't necessarily had a strong backbone of tech and giving them access to that so that they can supercharge their businesses. And again, have just gotten to build the team over the years, shape it, and help all of the people on the team continue to grow and develop, which is really core to who I am, but also really make a difference and drive that value for our customers. So I've been very fortunate. I found some incredible teams. I've gotten to grow with some absolutely wonderful people who are very core to who I am and are very close friends of mine. But how have I done it? I would say it's by being really intentional in all of those components that I want to layer on and add more of, and by being really focused. And a very type A person has certainly not hurt.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it seems like when you stumbled on that opportunity, it was really an opportunity to, it seems like it enhanced your leadership skills, and it kind of gave you an opportunity to show that, and also grow in that way. I think with especially with like working with smaller teams, as you said, you can make a huge impact in smaller teams. So I'm assuming that when you joined Lupio, as you said, you built everything from the ground up, and that was kind of like an opportunity for you to be like, oh, I have these leadership skills and I can really develop them. So was it just a couple of you when you joined Lupio as a CSM?
Yeah, so I was joining as employee 10. So it was a very small team in a co working space. And people told me I was crazy. I was going from a company that I had, joined early and grown to 150 to 200 people. So, like a much larger, more established company. And everyone was like, you're joining a 10-person company that's working out of a co working space. You must be insane. But I invested in the team and the people, and I had so much faith in this group of founders, and it was in no way misplaced. They are some of the most incredible people I've met in my life. And I could tell they were being so thoughtful, so intentional, so people centric. And I was like, you know what? These are the people I want to surround myself with. And I have so much faith that if I surround myself with these people, really great things are going to happen. So it's all come down to like the people are what matters most ultimately for me.
Yeah.
If you're not surrounding yourself with those great people, then everything is going to be 1,000 times harder. But if you are leading with intentionality and you're around other people who are really operating with intentionality, everything becomes easier.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I totally agree. And yeah, there's a huge lesson to be learned here, because a lot of people, who are presented with different opportunities when it comes to your career, there's so many companies sometimes that you're interviewing for, like bigger companies, as you said, with thousands of employees, or maybe like a startup, with like 5 or 10 employees. There's definitely, as you said, a calculated risk sometimes that you have to take, and it depends on different factors. It depends on, you definitely have a gut instinct and intuition that you listen to, but then, meeting with the people from these small teams, and their vision and what they believe in. So yeah, so my kind of take on it is that, you know you shouldn't feel unsafe, or feel like you can't go into a smaller company or a startup. It's definitely a risk, but you can definitely, come out of that with like a really huge career and, really with flying colors. So, yeah, I just want to encourage people to also take a look at those opportunities as well.
Completely. I think some people will say, like, hey, is the lesson here that I should join a small team? And that that's the better career path. And I would say no. Like there are hundreds of thousands of young tech companies, and a lot of them won't be successful. And some of them are going to be wildly successful. And there are
Mm,
some huge teams and really big companies where you can
mm,
find someone who is going to be your advocate and is going to help you grow and develop an absolutely phenomenal career as well. So I'm in no way saying that like small tech is better than big tech or these types of companies are better than those. My advice is
mm,
it's all about the people. If you can be really intentional and if you see a lot of intentionality and a lot of focus on people, in those around you, like that is always the bet I'm going to take. It doesn't matter whether the company is big or small. It matters whether the people are focused on the people around them and are being really intentional and thoughtful in their decision making process. And ultimately, like that is the winning recipe in my mind.
amazing. And so, what do you think when it comes to like best practices, when it comes to, building and maintaining strong relationship with customers? Because obviously, as a customer success manager, that's, one of the huge job responsibilities. So, can you shine a little bit light on that as well?
So I'll tell you some of the things that I see as common stumbling blocks. One very big pain point I see people get into is they get into a customer success manager job and then they think, hey, this customer's not emailing me back. Don't they know, like, I'm their CSM? They have to give back to me. My job is to talk to them, and like, they are not talking to me, and that's not okay. The customer doesn't owe you anything. Like, they don't need to talk to you. That's 0% they are obligated to talk to you. There's no obligation there. But people get really mad and they're like, this customer is ghosting me. They're not talking to me. I'm like, your job is to be so compelling that they have no choice but to talk to you. So there's a few exercises I usually recommend people do. The first is look at your last 5 emails that you sent to your customers and honestly ask yourself, if you got this in your inbox, would you reply? And usually when I do this exercise, all my CSMs are like, no, probably not. Like, okay, so we are not writing emails that are so compelling. Why? What are we doing wrong? We are usually saying something like, "Hey, hop on a QBR with me. Like, please, we're going to talk about so much value. It's going to be great. This is going to add tons of value." And I'm like, "Okay, but like you're basically selling snake oil at this point. They have no reason to believe that you're actually going to drive value." So I'm all about show, don't tell. In that first email, you got to email your customer and say, like, hey, super excited to talk to you. I was reviewing all of your analytics and I noticed that you're doing really well here. So I'm going to use a made up example, but like I was reviewing your analytics and I noticed that your team is doing great in terms of engagement. They are logging in, they are doing these behaviors, and that's really exciting to see. You're actually in like our top percent here, top 10%, or whatever you want to say. But I
Mm,
also noticed that you don't have branding in our configuration. So everyone is getting this diminished experience. And here is what that can lead to. And here's what best in class looks like. And I really want to get on a call and talk about how we can get you to that best in class in this other area because I think it's going to make a huge impact because of how well you're doing here. So this is obviously a very ornate made up scenario, but you are specifically showing them exactly how you are going to drive value, and that's going to
mm,
motivate them to actually get on the call with you. I see the exact same thing
mm,
when people actually have customers on the call. So they're like, hey, I'm going to do check-in calls. I'm like,
mm,
there is nothing I hate more than a check-in call because all
mm,
you are doing is training your customers that you don't drive any value. If
mm,
you ever utter the phrase just checking in, you are telling your customer, hi, I have no value to provide today. Can you tell me? Tell me how to do value for you. Tell me, teach me. Um, and suddenly your customer's like, no, I'm busy. I don't have time to teach you how to provide value to me. Um, so it's like stop with the check-in calls, find an agenda and find a way to drive meaningful value. So, hey, I really want to talk to you once a month. Here's what we're typically going to cover. In the first meeting, here are 3 bullet points again. Like, this is exactly what we're going to dive into. And don't say we're going to dive into the analytics. Say we're going to dive into like XYZ metrics. Here's what I'm seeing. And on that call, you got to drive that value. So you can never show up without an agenda. You can never show up just checking in. You always have to have a really clear insight into what you're hoping to accomplish. Even if it's a little bit more vague and it's something like, hey, we really need to understand what your business's top priorities are in the year ahead. So I need to know what you have set as KPIs. What are you being comped on? Do you have a variable plan and how is that built? Like, that's a great question to ask your customers. So you're coming in and you don't have the metrics and the analytics necessarily in that kind of call, but you have a really clear set of discovery questions that you're going to come to them with. And I would say all of those things. And again, it's all about intentionality. Like, you're showing them what you can do and you're being really intentional in every single touch point. And in customer success, like, that's the way to win.
Yeah, that's awesome advice again, and I completely agree because I've seen the same thing as you mentioned, and being successful in certain things that you mentioned and certain things that we were also not doing in the right way, I would say. And yeah, one of the things is, I think what you mentioned was really, the correct way because as you said, the customers don't owe you anything. And especially sometimes you might go into a meeting with them or you might email them saying, oh, we really want to know this, or, we want to ask you about this. And well, the answer is honestly, they don't owe you anything, as you said. They don't owe you any answers to your questions. So it's more about, what you can do for them instead of, the opposite. So I think, yeah, that's great advice again. So if, any customer success managers are listening, you can definitely work on those things when it comes to like emails and conversations. And so, yeah, my next question is that what has been your biggest challenge as a VP of customer success and how did you overcome it?
I mean, as any business leader, I think you're always trying, I mean, as any person, as any human, you're always trying to find the right balance. You have so many conflicting priorities. And so you always need to try to find the balance. And the goal is, hey, where can I find scenarios that are like win, 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 win? How can I get creative to make more of those happen? And then when I have to make the right trade offs, like, how am I hitting that right balance? So whenever I can, it is how do we approach the scenario and stop coming to it from a negotiation mindset where somebody wins and somebody loses. I think
Mm,
a lot of the time people, especially when they get into those first leadership roles, they're like, hey, like, this is a negotiation. Our customer's going to win and we're going to lose, or the company's going to win and the employee is going to lose. Um, and you have to start to think like, hey, what if I could do anything? Is there any scenario that exists where the company wins, the customer wins, and the employee wins? Like, what scenario like that could hypothetically exist? And if it doesn't exist, how do you strike the right balance so you are not always choosing, one party and creating these really inequitable relationships? So one of the challenges is always like, hey, how do I stop with this kind of linear thinking of it's a negotiation and one person's going to win and one person's going to lose, and really pull myself into this like, let's get crazy. What scenarios could exist and how do I make more of those happen? And when I can't, because sometimes, like, that scenario does not exist, how do I make sure that I'm hitting the right balance? So, like, hey, maybe today in this situation, this is what's going to have to happen. But how do I make sure that I'm not stacking 10 of those decisions together so that this one party always feels like they're losing? Like, how do I really think big picture and zoom in and out
mhm,
to make it right for all of the parties, essentially? Because it is like
mhm,
every one of those things is a relationship. And in any relationship, there are going to be times where, like, you want pizza and your husband wants sushi. Okay, cool. But if that happens 20 times in a row, suddenly you're going to be really annoyed. So, like, yeah, maybe the first time we can get a sushi pizza and it's great, everyone's happy. Um,
Mhm.
but eventually, like, you got to find the balance. So, it's zooming in and out and finding those correct scenarios and
Mhm.
trying to take care of everyone in each relationship.
Mhm. Awesome. Okay, and so moving on to the next question. So, if you could make one major change to the customer success industry today, what would it be and why?
One major change to the customer success industry today. I would say I think there's a lot of people advocating for this, but I think the biggest change I would make is you need to stop thinking of it as like this silo department that is going to manage all of your churn. Um,
Mm,
and really think of it as a collaborative approach. So I would say anytime I'm in a scenario where people are really effectively collaborating and customer success is responsible for surfacing the data and saying, hey, we have churn risk here, we have churn risk here are the reasons, let's work together.
mhm,
And you can say like, hey, let's get customer success in pre-sale, like let's help you close more business and let's make sure it's the
mhm,
right kind of business. The more you can
mhm,
work and have customer success essentially be the voice and the data that is helping inform the business, but not the sole point of owning that customer. Like the business owns the customer. The CSM never owns the customer. And we really need to think like the business owns the customer and the business drives the success or failure of the customer. The customer
mhm,
success manager, the customer success team is meant to be the voice, the source of data, certainly a point of influence. But I would say that
mhm,
that mentality still needs to be championed a lot more across the industry.
mhm, definitely. And now we move to a little bit more into like relationships, and I'm just curious about, you as a working mother. So, how do you handle like the pressures of the job, and then obviously pressures from your personal life as well, and create that balance in your personal life and professional life?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, this is one of those areas where I would love to say I'm wildly innovative and like, here's the secret, everyone.
Mm,
But I'm incredibly lucky and fortunate is the honest answer. I mean, my husband and I were very intentional in our decision making, and we both said, "Hey, we're going to work fully remote,"
mm,
and like that's the decision we're both going to make. And so that has given us a huge support in that, like, we're both home, we're both fully remote, and
mm,
we're able to take care of the children if something goes wrong, if they need us. Like, we're both available and we're both here, so it's not all falling on me. um,
mm,
and that's incredibly lucky. I know a lot of people haven't been in that position, but I will say we've been very intentional where, like something could come along where someone offers way more money to one of us hypothetically, and we'd say like, no, like this is a decision we have made, we're being very intentional about it, and this is ultimately
mm,
what's best for our family. So again, it's being willing to like
mm,
resist some of those temptations and really focus on what is right for your family and be
mm,
very intentional and aligned with your partner. That has helped me a tremendous amount. I also,
mm,
they say it takes a village. I am incredibly lucky. I have that village. So I have a nanny who is upstairs with my children. I have my mother who lives very close, and her favorite thing in the world is spending time with our children.
mm,
So how do I manage all of those pressures? Is I have a great village. I've been very intentional about how I structure my life, how my partner
mm,
structures his life. And we have found something that's working really well for us, but obviously that's not
yeah.
accessible for
Like,
everybody. Like, you can't always have a scenario where childcare is really easy. And so my advice is always like, be intentional wherever you can, figure out where you're willing to compromise and where you're not. And then, like, you're the mom, you get to set these boundaries and make these decisions and say like, this is an area where I am willing to compromise, and this is a decision that I think is ultimately going to be best for my children. And this is an area where I'm not, and just try to be as intentional and thoughtful as you can be, whatever scenario you're working with.
Awesome. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about inspiration now. So I'm just curious, is there any person in your life or people, different people in your life that have inspired you in whether it comes to your professional life or your personal life?
Yes, my life is like an endless source of people who have really inspired me and who I'm eternally grateful for. So my mother, she really showed us all, like she was the first person at every like field trip, bake sale, whatever it was. Like she was very much so a very present, engaged, active person in my life growing up. And I think she really set a bar that I want to meet when it comes to just like being very present and there. Um,
Mm,
she yeah was never really let me down when it came to that, so she was always very very present when I was growing up. And I've met a lot of people in my career who've really shown me how to be present and be there for your team as well as you're growing in your career. So as an example, the CEO at Lupio, like he was so focused on being there and really showing up for his team, and that really informed how I wanted to be as a leader. It totally changed my approach, and
mm,
that is very much so how I lead. Is like I always want to be there. I want to be present. I want my team to know that I am invested in their success. And again, it's a relationship. It's not just them working for me. Like I am here and I'm present. And I learned so much of that from this CEO at Lupio, who I'm so lucky to have had the opportunity to work for. Going way back, even in university, I had a professor who I ended up TAing for. So he brought me along to write a whole bunch of case studies for the students in his class. And he really pushed me to think like, hey, let's create these case studies and let's make sure we're approaching things and trying to create these scenarios where again there's like these win-win-win. Like let's get people out of this linear thinking mindset and let's create opportunities, create scenarios where people can like stop focusing on the realities that they're seeing and that linear mindset and really start to get creative and think outside of the box. And that has shaped a huge part of who I am and a huge part of my approach. So I have been like wildly lucky throughout my life, throughout my career. Like even going back to high school, I had a drama teacher who really gave me a ton of confidence and made me feel like I had a voice for the first time. And now I will get up on conference stages and speak, and a lot of that is credited to this like wonderful teacher I had back when I was in high school. So
mm.
I am incredibly lucky, and I think life is full of inspirational people, and you just have to like stop and be grateful sometimes, because I've been wildly lucky to have encountered so many of them.
Yep, that's true. Absolutely. Okay, so this is just a little bit, um, yeah, just I would say like a little bit random, but what do you do to relax? Like, what's your guilty pleasure? Or, at the end of the day, how do you like, just sit and, have, a relaxing time?
I'm like, oh, I have a 15-month-old and a 3-year-old. I don't know if I do relax.
That's true.
I'm like, parent life, does that exist? So I would say, what do I do to relax? I mean, one, I very much so think a lot of parents, when you split it out, like I think the noun of parenting, most parents love. So like your children, most parents are like, yes, I'm here for that. Like I love my children. I'll do anything for them. The verb of parenting, like the actual act of parenting, I feel like some parents love and some people are like, do I want to spend 2 hours at the park? I don't know. I really love the verb of parenting. So for me, like one of my favorite things to do is go to the park with my kids, take them, for walks, take them to the petting zoo. Like that genuinely really energizes me. I love doing all of those activities. So I'm incredibly lucky that when I'm investing that time with my children, um, it's one of my favorite things to do. I will say I took an independent play course a while ago, and it totally transformed how I was approaching a lot of these activities with my kids, and it made them way more fun, like way more enjoyable. I love doing all of those activities with my kids, and a big part of it is that they are now such strong independent players. So that like they are really thriving when we're doing a lot of those activities, which is great. In terms of what do I do outside of that, baking is still very core to who I am. I love teaching my daughter now to bake, and my guilty pleasure is reality TV. Like if there is any new season of like I don't know, Perfect Match, Love Is Blind, like I am here for it. Bad reality TV is my jam.
Amazing. Okay. And so we'll end it just by talking about two things. First is, what do you hope, or, what are you anticipating when it comes to your career? What's next for you?
What's next for me? I think that the best way to describe what's next for me is I've been super fortunate throughout my career to be really intentional and really focused on driving that value for people. So, like taking care of people, investing in the people around me. And the more I invest in other people and those around me, like the more that has allowed my career to accelerate and grow. So what's next for me is hopefully more of that, like more investing in people, more growing people, more driving value for people, and more seeing them continue to grow. And finding more opportunities to do that. So again, like I've just launched this course, really excited to be able to help more people who are just starting out in tech and building customer success functions. Like I'm excited to have found a way that I can hopefully scale that and really help a lot of founders or junior success um, team members like really build things that are going to be the benchmarks to their career and accelerate their career in a really meaningful way. And also investing in my team and all of those people and helping them continue to grow and develop in their careers in really meaningful ways while it's driving value for all of the customers. So, very excited to continue to invest in all of those people. I don't know how that shapes up in terms of like, this is the title. Like, I very much so am just focused on, hey, here's all the people and here's how I want to continue to invest in them.
Awesome. And the last question is, I ended usually by saying, like, can you say five things that you are proud of about yourself?
Five things that I am proud of about myself. I would say I very much so try to, I mean, invest in my children. Like I'm very intentional as a parent, and I feel like a lot of mothers have so much mom guilt. And at the end of the day, like I'm really proud of what I'm doing and how I'm showing up for my children, and how I'm investing in them and thinking of their childhood. So yeah, I'm like proud of how I show up as a mom, and that might not be a popular opinion, but I really am. I also would say like I'm really proud of how I invest in my team. I think that I really show up for people and try to invest in their careers and help them grow in a meaningful way, and really listen to them and understand what's happening. So, how I'm investing in my children and how I'm investing in my team. Um,
Mhm.
I would say I'm really proud of the level of intentionality I've been able to apply to most things. I think like it's difficult to not just go with the flow and make fast decisions and like stop and pull back. And I think that
Mhm.
intentionality is really key to like who I am and how I've grown. So I would say I am proud of that. Um, what else? I would say I am very proud of. I mean, am I allowed to say? I said how I'm showing up as a mother, but like my children and seeing them continue to grow, like it's just
Yeah, yeah,
it's so cool. Like
yeah.
seeing my daughter start to like actually speak to my son and like say some of these things and how she's showing up as a sister. She's just like the sweetest, boldest little girl. And my son is just, oh my gosh, he is like bold. He has no fear. And it's like so cool to see these tiny humans doing incredible things. And in a year, you go from figuring out you have hands to like wanting to conquer the world. And that's just phenomenal. Um, and I would say, lastly, I am proud of how I am able to give myself grace when I can't do everything I want. Because as a working mom, you're never going to be able to do everything you want the way you want to. And so
Yeah.
I try really hard to not beat myself up when that happens. I have a book that I read my daughter all the time. So if anyone has young kids, there's this series called Slumberkins, and it is like therapist written books, and they come with really cute
Mm,
matching stuffies, and they're adorable. And so we read the Yak book, and the Yak is all about how like you don't have to be perfect, and
mm,
one of the lines is like, "Hey, you are loved and you're enough just for being you." And I try to adopt that same grace with myself. Like I'm never going to be perfect. Let's give myself a little
mm,
grace because I'm doing the
mm,
best I can and I'm trying really hard and showing up in the way that I usually want to. But like
mm,
you got to give yourself grace, and I think that's important because ultimately your kids are going to learn what you're teaching them, but they're going to learn even more from
mm.
how you're treating yourself. So I try to give
Yeah.
myself grace so my children will do the same when they're older.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that's definitely amazing advice. And yeah, I think I will end this episode here, but it has been so amazing talking to you and having this conversation. And I'm especially grateful for, first of all, obviously doing this episode with me, but then also just being vulnerable and then sharing your experiences and, sharing your different learnings with me and then our audience as well. I hope it helps them and they can grow and learn from it as well. So yeah, I just want to say thank you and good luck and keep doing what you're doing because that's amazing. And yeah, I can't wait to see what happens next when it comes to your career or just you as a person.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on as well. It was great to connect.
Awesome. Thank you and have a good week ahead.
You too. Bye.
Bye.